The resurrection of Jesus, as far as all the Christian churches are concerned, is absolutely fundamental to the faith. There's no question, in my mind, that it's ever going to be changed.
The resurrection may be fundamental to the faith, but in our examination of what really happened, it's hard to find solid historical evidence. The four Gospels all tell different stories.
When we read the resurrection narratives, it's like reading four different reports of the same football game in four rather different newspapers. And the fact that actually there may be some disagreement about whether it was a foul or not doesn't mean that there wasn't a game and that somebody didn't win it and so on. If one of them says there were two angels and another one says there was one angel, if one of them says Mary Magdalene was there all by herself and somebody else says Mary Magdalene was there with one or two other women, then these are the sorts of variations that you expect to get, like the different newspaper reports, the football match. And they're not something that should worry you to the point of saying, therefore nothing happened. That would be quite a false conclusion.
But in the earliest versions of the earliest Gospel, Mark, there are no resurrection appearances at all. The Gospel simply ends with the discovery of an empty tomb. The last verses of Mark, which do contain resurrection stories, were added 200 years later.
None of the Gospel stories is CNN in Jerusalem in the year 30.
The Gospels are written in the form of historical biography, so many people have assumed that they are exactly that. But that's not actually what they are. They're written to demonstrate to people the importance and the meaning of Jesus and his teaching. That was what they're for, and they do that very well. But they're not primarily interested in what actually happened back there.
Matthew and Luke do have resurrection appearances, but they don't agree about the details. In Matthew, Jesus meets the women near the tomb and then meets his disciples just one time, and that is on a mountain in Galilee. In Luke, Jesus meets two unnamed disciples who do not recognize him, and then with the 11 remaining disciples before leaving them in a village outside Jerusalem. The last Gospel, John, has many different resurrection stories. For many modern scholars, these variations suggest that the stories were not written to tell of a miraculous event, but with an entirely different and political motive. For it was the supposed witnesses of the resurrection who became the leaders of the early church. Even to this day, the Pope claims his authority in a direct, unbroken line of ordination from Peter, the first disciple said to have seen the risen Christ. Some scholars go so far as to suggest that the story of the resurrection was also created as an extraordinary psychological tool to bring in new converts.
If it hadn't been for the resurrection of Jesus and his rising from the dead, victorious from the dead, we wouldn't be celebrating Christmas.
It's a bit like when you go into the army. The first thing we want is to take over your body. So symbolically, let's say we're going to shave all your hair. As long as you give in on this, we got you. We got your body, which is what we want. In one sense, sometimes the churches, some churches at least, do the same. We're going to tell you something unbelievable that you got to believe.
When they could just relax.
If you believe it, then you will believe that they alone control heaven, that without them you cannot get into heaven, and then they've got you. You've left your brains in the parking lot.
That's a statement that may be offensive to many Christians.